Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's a mystery that either you or your friend's life or family has yet to be solved? Please remember to like, share, hype, listen and ask for shoutouts. None today, maybe tomorrow, and subscribe. The death of my uncle when he was in the military stationed in France in the 1960s. He and his buddies were hanging out at his house one night and decided to go out. He told his wife goodbye, and she never saw him alive again. He was found days later dead and face down in a creek. The Army gave my aunt no information. They didn't even release the autopsy findings. When it gets interesting is all the guys who were with him gave the same exact story about what had happened. No deviations. My father was in the Army at the same time and asked a lot of questions, but the Army didn't give him any answers. Things that made us go, The Army flew my aunt back to the USA. Normally a widow would have to find housing after her spouse passes away, but the Army forced her to live on an Oklahoma Army base when she got back. I'm not sure how many months she and my cousins lived there. The Army never explained to her why she had to live there. After a while, they let her leave, and she went to live with my grandparents for a time. At one point after this, my grandpa received a suspicious letter with money in it. There were rumors my uncle was a covert operative, or possible my aunt's French mob-connected family had something to do with it. Yes, mob. Fast forward to the 1980s. My uncle was president of a college in Texas, so he had connections. At first, he submitted a FOIA hoping to finally get information. The FOIA was denied, so he contacted a senator he knew for help. The senator did his best, contacted everyone he could think of that might help. He told my uncle all he did was run into brick walls. He also told him this. The senator was basically told to back off and leave it alone. I know I've missed some details, but this is long enough. My aunt and grandparents were heartbroken. My grandfather owned a successful construction and paving company in Buffalo in the 50s. Naturally, he had many encounters with various mobsters in that business. He managed to keep them out of his business, but did enlist the help of some former Irish mob goons from New York City to work on some of his crews as a deterrent, and in a couple of cases, payback. There were death threats, a drive-by shooting at his house, a thwarted kidnapping attempt, and other stereotypical hijinks. He eventually sold the business and moved in the late 60s or early 70s and started a completely unrelated career, one that he was successful in and hadn't really been infiltrated by the mob in any meaningful way. My uncle had a difficult relationship with my grandfather. Moved to Colorado in the early 70s, and they saw each other very infrequently. When my cousin graduated high school, she left Colorado and moved to Chicago for college. She had maybe been in the same room with my grandfather 6 or 7 times in her whole life. On a date with her boyfriend, also from Colorado, she went to a nice steakhouse and sat, waiting to order. A waiter approached and very nervously presented her with an expensive bottle of wine she had not ordered, and told her that her meal had been paid for. He explained that the men at the corner table had sent it over. In the corner, there was a table of serious-looking older men, who had already been seated when my cousin arrived, looking and behaving like extras from The Sopranos. My cousin, being completely baffled and very outgoing, went straight over to their table to thank them and ask why they were being so generous. One of them mentioned my grandfather by name and said that, out of respect, they wanted to make sure he knew that no member of his family would ever have a problem in the city of Chicago. To this day, we have no idea how they knew who she was, who they were, or why Chicago mobsters would even know who my grandfather was, considering the lengths he went to keeping the mob out of his business dealings for decades, in a business he had sold 20 years earlier. He took that secret to his grave, so it's unlikely we'll ever know what that was all about. Most of the people from that era who would know anything about it are gone now. I can't help but think that somewhere, collecting dust in an FBI file, there's some mention of my grandfather in a transcribed phone call that would shed some light on it. In my family, the biggest mystery was why small things kept disappearing around the house for years. Pens, socks, keys, even my mom's glasses would go missing all the time. We blamed each other and thought we were all just forgetful. When we finally moved a heavy dresser during renovation, we found a huge stash of stolen items underneath it. Our old cat had been quietly collecting things for almost a decade. We still cannot figure out how he managed to grab so much without anyone noticing. During a night out, I parked my car in a street across from the bar we were going to. We took an Uber home that night, even though I was sober. I clearly remember looking at my car before leaving. The next day, when we went to pick it up, it wasn't on the street I had parked it, so I assumed it had been towed. We turned down another street to try and circle back around, only to find my car parked in a completely different street, facing the opposite direction of where I had parked it. I regret not asking the bar for their surveillance to try and figure out what happened. My grandpa died in 2005. He lived on a homestead he built with this big old tree farm. He would walk his property every day. One morning he went out for his walk and did not return. Long story short, he had a stroke while on his walk, was found unresponsive, taken to a hospital, put on life support, and died a day or two later after family had arrived. He also journaled every single day. Simple entries like went grocery shopping, kids brought food over, had a doctor's visit, stuff like that. Really simple. My uncle just died recently, and we were going through his personal belongings over the holiday. In those belongings we found the journal and decided to look at my grandpa's last few entries. The last few entries were, not feeling well, had stroke today, in hospital, son and grandson arrived today, 2:45 p.m., died, I'm resting now. The official time of death was 2:49 p.m. The handwriting from each entry is identical to the previous, going back years. We cannot see a difference in the handwriting. My grandpa, grandma, father, aunt, and uncle are all dead now. The whole family is dead except us. We will never get an answer on these entries. There's no one to ask. My sister sent me this thread and told me I should post the story of my friend who disappeared and we never heard from again. I was in high school in 2003 and was living in the UK as an exchange student when another girl started at our school. We became fast friends and she became part of our larger friend group. She had no family living there that any of us knew of, and she supposedly lived with roommates nearby. We were all 16 to 17-ish. At the end of the school year, I left to go home, and she stayed for the final school year. She was applying for universities there, and we talked on the phone several times throughout the year. Friends saw her in class, we wrote letters and sent packages, etc. One day she came to school and stopped a friend of ours and said she desperately needed to talk to him. He hadn't been to homeroom in weeks, so he asked her to give him a few minutes and he'd be right back. She was never seen again. She never returned to school, and the police even showed up to ask my friend what he knew. Nothing. I tried emailing her for years. I even posted about her on one of those looking for someone websites and got no hits. I have no idea if she had an emergency and had to move back to her home country, if someone showed up for her work and took her away, or if she picked up and started a new life somewhere. I never got an email back from her, and she still comes up in conversation. I'm the last person to see her at school, and I get nostalgic and start talking about our mutual year in high school. Until the day I die, I will wonder what happened to her.
All right, just, I love my wife. So full context here. 27 years ago, long before I met her, I was in the Marines and I briefly dated this girl in South Korea. And, we just hung out for a couple months and I went back to Okinawa. She was supposed to fly over, didn't come. Anyway, point is, she gave me her cell phone number because I guess in Korea, everybody had a cell phone in the late 90s because the infrastructure wasn't great for landlines, so she had a cell phone. I didn't even know it was cool. Anyway, not the point. The point is, although, I mean, this makes a lot more sense, especially pre-social media and internet, like real internet. Like, there was like dial-up then. Never heard from her again. She wrote me, we talked on the phone, and then like, gone. And all I knew was her name, and it was an extremely common name in South Korea, so she's gone. Actually, a reality show in like 2016 or 17 that like find old people like reached out to me somehow, but obviously nothing came up. It doesn't matter. I am so happy with my life now, but you're talking about these mysteries and things that were unsolved. Like, that's definitely one. Anyway, I hope you guys are great, and see you tomorrow. Take care.
When I was about 9, someone broke into our family house while we were on holiday. They didn't steal anything, but left a giant blood puddle with no drips to or from it on our upstairs landing. A strange, fabric-y blood pattern running along the stairs, and apparently blood was sprayed, likely out of a bottle, all over our cleaning supplies in the bathroom. Initially, the police said an animal had broken in to give birth, even though the lock was clearly broken open by force, and then said the blood was human, but closed the case without a conclusion. I was too young to be scared. My mom said she couldn't sleep for weeks and was convinced she heard movement in the attic. The hatch was directly above the stain. But I think about it a lot. A lot of weird stuff happened in that house. My great-grandfather's Irish mob ties in New York City in the late 30s, early 40s. There are whispers that he helped coordinate taking care of things, but also gambled a lot. There came a time when someone told him, "I can't protect you anymore." He replied, "I don't need your protection," and put his wife and 4 children on a bus all the way to San Francisco in 1943. He wasn't Irish, but my great-grandmother was, and we think he got involved with the Irish mob through her. Japanese side of the family, mom's side, is filled with all the Japanese soap opera tropes you can imagine. The biggest unsolved mystery is how my step-aunt found a way to pay for my mom's university tuition. My mom had average grades and knew that her family did not have the money to afford it, despite the fact her dad, Grandpa, worked as a diplomat for Japan. Per my mom, step-aunt walked in one day and handed over a bag of cash and a check linked to an account that was not in the family. No one knows what or how she got it. She was a recently married woman who was planning on being a housewife, mid-80s, when married in her mid-20s. The only backstory on her is that she was, like my mom, really into punk rock and played bass guitar. Both her and my mom would go to underground concerts and be all-around punks with the motorcycle gangs at the time. Uncle, who was married to step-aunt, was just as confused but didn't ask questions. He was a caring and the typical lovable and endearing idiot in the family. He loved step-aunt enough to trust her and not question things. To this day, no one knows where the money came from. It paid for my mom's university tuition. Yes, step-aunt is still alive and well. Single now because uncle died of lung cancer from smoking too much. Still lives in the same apartment she first bought in Tokyo. I met my dad when I was an adult, a few months after a medical DNA test revealed that the person I thought was my dad was not really my dad. The new dad and I looked enough alike that it seemed legit. We also have the same blood type. Fast forward 20 years and I take a so-called vanity DNA test that shows I'm indeed part of this family. I matched my dad's sister, cousin, etc. A few years later, I'm rummaging around in my family's old photos and find a picture of my dad's brother from about a year before I was born. There are 0 pictures of my dad among these photos. At the time, the brother was supposedly a happily married man, so what was he doing hanging out with a 16-year-old who liked to party? I am not in concert with my designated dad, and his brother died years ago. My mom is your basic liar and not trustworthy. The only hope of solving this mystery is if the brother's kids ever take a test. I'm all about spilling the beans when it comes to family mysteries, but I feel like this one can be left unspoken until proven otherwise. I just remembered this one. Many years ago, before cell phones were ubiquitous, I was a 911 dispatcher and received a 911 call from a gas station payphone off a rural mountain highway. Caller had been westbound on a divided part of the highway and told me that they had seen what appeared to be a pale woman with blood on her head holding an infant standing by the eastbound side of the highway. The caller headed back to the location and would meet Highway Patrol, CHP, there. Officers, and I might have started fire EMS as well, meet in the RP in the area of the sitting, and no one's there. They check up and down the highway and find nothing, so cancel the call. One officer just gets a weird feeling and goes back to the spot, gets out of his patrol car and goes over and looks over the side through some brush. About 50 feet or so down slope is a wrecked car. Pinned inside is a dead woman driver with a head injury, and in the back in a car seat is her baby alive and in a car seat. She matched the description, the mystery woman, but she died on impact and was also pinned in, so the other driver couldn't have actually seen her. Creeped us all out then, and me again just now. One day my cousin told me his wife he was going to the gym. He never came home. He had cleared out their bank account, had already packed a bunch of stuff he wanted to take, valuables, tools, firearms, etc., and just disappeared. It was obvious he wanted to go, so there was no police involvement, but this was years ago, and he's never resurfaced. His wife hired a private investigator, and there was really no trace of him anywhere. No credit card charges, no phone activity, nothing. One theory is that he went to Mexico or Central America, where he had friends. No one really knows why he left, but it's a family mystery we always joke about. My Irish grandmother's older brother vanished from near the Irish border around the start of the First Civil War in the North, so early 1920s. Never said a word to anyone, never packed up any stuff like the local boys who headed to Donegal or Galway for a job, just walked out of the house one day and was never seen again. It's recently, as in the past 2 weeks, come to light that the grandmother had passed as Protestant since she'd met my grandfather, but that her family were actually Catholic. This has shifted my main theory from he stumbled on something and the IRA killed him to he ran off and joined the IRA and was probably either killed in action or settled in the North later. But until I can afford one of those ancestry kits, I already know it's 3/4 Irish and then Canadian French and some indigenous Canadian in there too, which, given that all my Canadian ancestors are meant to be of European origins, means someone was a little naughty. I'll never know. An uncle of mine died from drug overdose when I was 3 years old. I'm relying on info that has been told to me by various family members back in 1989. It was a Friday in December, and he had hit the lottery and won something like $5,000. He decided to celebrate with a buddy of his by getting high. They went to a drug house to buy and use, and my uncle wound up dying from an overdose. As everyone in the family was gathering at my grandmother's house, my uncle's friend came to their door apologizing while crying and saying it was a setup over and over. Apparently, my uncle's watch was missing as well as the remaining money that he had won. I'm 99.9% sure he died from a drug overdose, and some lowlifes took advantage of the situation to rob him. But there's that small part of me that wonders if it was possible that they knew about the lottery winnings and sold him something laced with something which caused him to overdose and they could rob him. It's not my story, but this happened to my friend. Her boyfriend had cheated on her with her stepmother. There was a huge problem that went down with it. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but her stepmother ended up filing a R charge. So for months, this girl and her boyfriend are buying lawyers trying to see how he could get out of it, etc. He spent over $10,000 just for a lawyer. Well, his lawyer said if this were to go to trial, he would still have to do at least 4 years. So the trial is coming up. maybe in a week, and the stepmother ends up in the hospital. Apparently, she's willingly took a medication she was allergic to. Then she ended up passing, and out of nowhere, a few days after, my friend told me what happened. My friend goes, "I think my dad killed her." I asked her what she meant, but she just said, "I think my dad killed her." Still have no idea how she died. He avoided jail, and she's still with the dude. New Year's. My buddy and I were at a bar downtown and got out and couldn't get a cab. It was minus 10 degrees out, cops were out like crazy, and this was also before Uber or Lyft. I literally asked a cop for a ride home and he said no. We huddled with some strangers for warmth, and then they said they got a cab, and I basically begged them to take me with them because I was going to freeze to death and my phone was almost dead. I needed to iterate. My friend was with us the entire time. So they say yes. I get into the cab and realize my friend isn't with us, and I was like, what the So I called him thinking maybe he accidentally wandered off. We were drinking and all. He answers the phone and I'm like, "Hey, we're in the cab, where are you?" He says he's at home. I'm extremely confused because I was just with him maybe 1 minute at max earlier. He lived at least 15 to 20 minutes away on the other side of town. I asked him, "Are you sure?" I was worried he was drunk or lying or something, and he goes, "No, I'm sitting in my kitchen right now having a beer." Next day rolls around. I ask the people to take me back to my car. I get home and charge my phone and call him, and I was like, "So what really happened last night?" And he was confused. I explained my side of the situation, and he was like, "Dude, I really don't know. I was standing there, and next thing I knew, you called me, and I was in my kitchen." We talked about it for like 10 years, and never figured out how he magically teleported home in the span of less than 60 seconds. I would like to explain it away that he was drunk and not where he thought he was or something weird, but he was one of the most honest people I knew, like almost too honest more of the time. He said he woke up in his bed and remembered the phone call, but could not remember how he got home at all. He also said he was basically just tipsy when he got home. He wasn't trying to get smashed and be out like that he waited until he got home to get actually drunk with his roommate. I just don't know. My daughter, 9 years old, gets up one morning and goes straight to the bathroom in front of the mirror. She calls me and shows me her tongue. It was one of his hairs. What? It had entered his tongue and came out 2 to 3 millimeters next to it, like we would do a suture. So this is already super weird, but the thing is that there was a tight double knot. We didn't have a smartphone, so no photos. She was a very serious child, she still is, and there were no jokes on the program. We talk about it sometimes, and it's really our own mystery. That totally insane thing will never know how it's possible. Multiple. Hard to choose which. Details vague. Very intentionally. A family member was murdered back around the year 2000. Authorities didn't realize they were murdered until later due to reasons. Multiple people I know were suspects, mostly small-town BS. No real person of interest, never any answers. Another acquaintance went missing, was searched for. I had a dream about them being found in a spot that in a dream I was familiar with but not certain of the location. Dream me was certain that if I described that place to my dad, he'd be able to tell me where it was. Their vehicle, which was a prominent part of the dream, was found that day in a place far from the possible dream location. But the dream location could have easily been on the route to where the vehicle was found. My dad had no clue what place I was describing, just some guesses. And I've never gone and looked at the most places. An item of mine that was definitely in the dryer, I'd put it in there myself, intended on using it that day, was found in my vehicle several days later in another town. The fire started in the wall behind the dryer. What? After it burned, we discovered that same house had a wall that completely enclosed a previously burnt wall. In that wall, There was a door with the words "Keep Out" written in red paint. One of the rooms, that wall bordered, had a huge hole or pit in the foundation that just had bare dirt several feet lower than the foundation. It just had wood floors built over it. That property had been 7 structure fires that I'm certain of, and there may have been at least 2 more. This story is sad and yet haunting. Here goes. My late maternal grandmother, my mother's mother, was born in March of 1925. A year prior, in the same month in 1924, her mother gave birth to a baby girl. Here's where things get haunting. The baby girl only lived for 7 days. She would not cry, eat, drink, etc. Just existed for those 7 days until she passed. 3 months later, my maternal grandmother was conceived in June of 1924 and was born in March of 1925. I was told this story some 30 years ago when I was in high school, and it still lingers with me to this day. My best friend witnessed a hit and run when we were in grade 2 or 3. The woman who was hit was an educational assistant at our school, and the police believed it was a targeted attack. The lady, Nancy Quick, was thrown in the air and died in the hospital a few days later. My friend and her older brother walked to school daily and happened to see the entire thing. The vehicle had been stolen from a church parking lot. Church was next door to our grade school and found abandoned in a cornfield wiped free of prints. Police believed it was Nancy's husband, who she was separated from, and she had planned to file for divorce. He had an alibi, and they couldn't prove he took out a hit on his wife. It's still considered an unsolved case. Personally, I do think it was the husband, but realistically, it could have been anyone.